In this episode, action, romance, plane crashes, embezzlement, lies, accusations, and infidelity. If this was a movie, that sounds intriguing, but the fact that all these things were made by one dude makes me feel exhausted. Some people have a lot of free time. Michele was a lovely young lady grown in a Catholic household.
Being raised in a Catholic family, you just didn't get divorced. I mean, when you were in a marriage, you were in it for good. So I was getting married once, and that was going to be it.
This is gonna end up biting her in the ass, by the way. Fresh out of high school, she met this guy who was talking to one of her classmates. She was bewitched by him, so much that she caught herself staring at him. And I guess he noticed that too. They started talking and he asked her out on a date. Marcus was a college student at the time, but also he had a hobby. He loved airplanes. On their first date, he took her for a ride. She was quite frightened by it, but as a teenager in love, she just brushed it off. Marcus was exciting, an adventure, and although Michele was quite the opposite, she thought they complemented each other pretty well. So well that 2 years later, they got married and Michele was living her own fairy tale.
Michele was always very, very devoted. She would just put him on a pedestal and really admired him.
It was the love of my life, and I just felt so at peace about it.
Life was doing good things for the couple. Marcus was a financial advisor. He started his own company and his hobby kind of grew. He was now performing at air shows, showing his impressive stunts. That guy was a pro at this. And Michele was a stay-at-home mom of 3 kids and living in a huge house. From the outside, they looked like those trophy families that everybody wanted to be. But the reality was not that at all.
He had a bit of a temper. It was a bit like walking on eggshells. Never quite knew who was coming through the door at 5 o'clock, so you just had to be prepared for it.
And nobody was safe from his awful tantrums. Even the nanny noticed a lot of violence coming from this pitch-perfect man.
He'd be happy one minute and then the next he'd be upset about the littlest thing. You know, he'd be trying to clean the garage. If the kids weren't right out there right away, he'd get upset and start yelling.
So he's a douche. And because he knew Michele wouldn't do anything about it, he continued with his adult temper tantrums. 10 years of the same. Can you imagine? The kids grew up in a volatile household and mom did nothing to stop that because what? Religion? I don't want to be so harsh on her because those are core values. She has had them ever since she was born. And Marcus probably noticed her complete devotion towards him fairly early in their relationship and took advantage of that. She was blinded by the concept of Marcus. And the picture-perfect family? That was all him. He will control how they look because appearances were consuming his life. That and he will get off by putting people down. Kind of low self-esteem trait. Marcus was an absent parent and husband, and Michele thought almost immediately that he was having an affair. She went into detective mode in the search for any evidence she could find.
Something in my gut just said, this isn't right. That's when I started checking the phone bills. I started looking in just to see if I could find a similar number that was called over and over again. And I happened to find one that was called every day about the same time every morning and about the same time every night.
Marcus tried to convince her it wasn't true. She was just someone at work. It meant nothing. But funny how life happens. That lady ended up living in the same place the family nanny lived. So Michele asked her to see if her husband's car was around the block. It was dark outside, so Rachel got out of the house and hopped on her car. She went around the block to see if she could spot her boss's car and bingo! She passed his car like 3 times just to be sure. It was most definitely Marcus's car. I mean, it checks his personality. He's a douche. But not enough for Michele because she forgave him. Her religious values were quite strict, so she had to. She made him call his mistress in front of her and tell her they cannot play anymore. You know, like a child that's just pleasing their parents because the dude kept on going every night to his mistress's house. As if he cared about Michele's opinion.
He would move out for a day or 2 and then he'd move back in, and then for a couple weeks it would be okay and then it would blow up again.
After sharing her husband with another woman for over a year, Michele finally had enough. she filed for divorce on December 30th, 2008.
And after that, things got extra spicy. New Year's Eve morning. Kids are watching their cartoons in the living room and Michele gets awakened by one of them. There were police officers outside her house. She let them in and they practically ransacked the place. They were looking for Marcus, but he was in Key West with his bitch. That's when Michele realized what exactly that her husband did for a living.
Marcus, the financial golden boy, was under investigation for bilking his clients out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. According to investigators, he had created a phony investment scheme called the Euro Fund.
The Euro Fund is basically what you will call now a Bitcoin scam company. One of Michele's good friends was one of the people who lost a lot of money thanks to Marcus. He was being sued left to right. Well, after his tropical adventure, he went back home and Michele told him everything. He told her to be calm. He was going to solve everything, that this was all just a big misunderstanding. But before that, he told Michele he had to go see his dad in Florida. As a pilot, he can just hop on his plane and leave. She thought this was completely normal, but the dude had a plan.
Later that same night, Michele received startling news. The plane he was piloting was missing.
He made a distress call, said his windshield had imploded.
They sent fighter jets to aid Marcus and they found the plane, but nobody was flying it. Later, the plane crashed and there was a search party, but the experts noticed something interesting. Marcus said in that distress call, one of his windows exploded, right? None of the windows were displaying what he said. The police for sure smelled a huge turd in the story. And given the problems the dude was facing, it was totally plausible he wanted either to fake his death or disappear completely. Regardless, the sick mother effer decided to jump from his plane to vanish and leave all the problems to Michele. By now, the embezzlement news was everywhere and a ton of Michele's good friends dropped her, thinking she must have known about the malpractice or maybe she was involved in that as well. So Marcus was perfectly fine leaving his ex-wife to pick up the pieces like the egotistical coward he is. And still, Michele was worried about his safety.
Finally, the hunt for Marcus ended on January 13th, when the embattled financial investor was discovered at a local Florida campground.
We had the TV on and they said they had found him with his wrist cut in the tent.
He's fine. He was piling more sentences and time in prison.
I just wish he would have asked for help.
I think he was just way too far in over his head. And I think pushed against a wall, he wasn't going to live like that.
These ladies have such a big heart to think this dude had a conscience. He was an egotistical prick. He didn't care about his family. He treated his kids like garbage. His world was himself and nobody else. I mean, he was going to go into hiding and leave his problems to explode on his family. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison and he was facing the security fraud charges. He still claimed to be innocent.
I know I can't carry this anger forever for him, for what he did. And I know I'll have to forgive him someday because I can't carry this for me or my kids.
I found an interview with one of Marcus's and Michele's kids. Her name is Alyssa, and she was around 11 when her life imploded. She remembers her dad telling her she could do everything her brothers can do. Apparently, he was actually a good dad. Well, kind of. She also remembers how her dad was quite the drinker and a womanizer. She also remembers the screams and the fact that she grew fright towards her dad because he was so explosive and irrational. And something the show didn't mention is that Marcus was a drug addict. So, not that great of a dad in the grand scheme of things. They were showered in wealth, tons of cars, trips, and gifts. It all disappeared horribly. They became homeless. Every single asset was auctioned to pay the people he embezzled. The family had nothing. Michele found a job and tried to keep the kids' life intact. They moved around a lot, but she kept the school and their friendships as they were. But stigma lingered in her friend group, and Alyssa was dropped by a lot of her friends because of Marcus's actions. Kids didn't even want to work with her at school. The kids and the family became almost like pariahs. And a disgusting bombshell, if you had any sort of empathy for this piece of crap, let me erase it for you. He sent Alyssa an email stating the following: Alyssa will end up as a pregnant teenager, an alcoholic, or a drug addict, and that she will never graduate and never go to college. He said she would just end her life. This email was backed up by her brothers and her mom. And she actually tried the latter, failing, thankfully. But the brothers and her mom think Alyssa is more akin to her dad than you might think. Apparently, Alyssa got her father's character. Because of the disturbing life her dad gave them, she cannot know what's real and what's not. She claims severe neglect from her mom, but everyone else disagrees. They were even investigated and found nothing. She will couch surf and make a mess every place she will go. She didn't obey house rules. She brought a pocket knife to school and had some shoplifting charges. She claimed to be working in a lot of places, but after the reporter checked, that was a lie. It seems like she's following her dad's patterns unbeknownst to her. And speaking about Marcus, he served 6 years in prison and is now free. He claims to have no feelings towards Alyssa. The email was a lie, and she's just manipulating people into donating to her using pity and sympathy. What we can attest here is that Marcus ruined the entire family. He destroyed his kids' minds and twisted them. Their childhood became a nightmare. They were rejected by everyone, and the house they were living had to go. I believe Alyssa just wanted to rebel because she has so much hatred she doesn't know what to do with it. I hope the family can find peace and unity because overall, they were all they had. And for those awful years after Marcus's betrayal, they were all they needed. Tell me what you think about this story in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. It really helps. This is a man so in love with his family that he did one of the dumbest things to keep their lifestyle intact. Thank you for watching.
Are you kidding me?